What is up, Square Nation? Welcome back to the Four Corners, the official podcast of No Counters, No Combos. And today we have a very special guest with us. Today we're talking with Trey Faircloth. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you for asking. You're on the East Coast as well, so I'm pretty sure it's late for you too. But I know that you are a family man, so I know sometimes it's a little difficult to commit to certain things, but I'm definitely glad for you to join us, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about Dragon Ball with you. First thing I want to ask you is in relation to the expansion packs that are coming out, expansion 14 and 15. Obviously, I know you're a big Trunks fan. I'm a big Trunks fan myself. So I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on the new one drop that the archetype is getting and how that's going to help, propel the deck forward, especially in the meta.
That Trunks one drop is pretty crazy for the deck. I do believe that the only cripple that deck will see is not seeing that card near turn 1 or turn 2. Other than that, if you hard mulligan for it and or to try to get it, you should be setting up your plays properly. Your opponent's going to be stuck in a weird spot where do they really want to attack you? Let you get it, but they have to attack you eventually, so there's no way to get around it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with, Trunks kind of putting your opponent in a tough spot because, it's not one of those leaders that, has to awaken at a certain, point of the game. Obviously, if your opponent's playing an aggro strategy and they're taking their own life, once they hit 4, you can flip to your backside. So I do like the way that Trunks leader is designed. I think it's very unique. It's probably the first of its kind in the game, not being able to take, any critical strikes on the front and then being able to awaken whether you or your opponent are at 4 life, and then obviously having that built-in spot removal on the back for 2 blue energy. I think it's just a really solid blue leader, and I'm glad that it's definitely getting support. But, moving forward, do you think you can get away with playing that leader with Trunks and just good blue stuff, or do you think it's worth it to play the archetype specific stuff like the Vegetos and stuff like that?
I feel like the card you at least have to play is the Trunks that plays itself whenever you take damage. That championship promo is pretty nuts. It's a free blocker that bounces 2 things back to hand, and it's just pretty free value. You could play just good stuff, but the ramp cards will help you play a boony on turn 3. If your opponent's really aggressive, then you'll just be getting free energy to crack back at them with, and that's just what the deck wants.
Yeah, I think the built-in ramp that it has, with the Vegetas and the Gokus flipping off of life, and now obviously with that new one drop that we're getting, you might be able to make the argument that you don't have to play the Supreme Kai of Time Unison. You could play Zeno or a quote unquote better blue Unison. Do you think playing the Zeno Unison is worth it for that deck, especially because if you're ramping off of Zeno and you're ramping off of life, if you can't utilize those energies or anything like that, they kind of just go away at the end of the turn. Do you think it's still worth it to make that, that type of play in the deck?
I think that if your focus is to hit the ramp on turn 1, kind of like where you're going into your turn 2, you have 3 energy, it'd probably be better off to play the baby Unison. That Unison is just the best blue Unison in the game. There's no real dispute about it. It goes with the 5 counters, and you'll get that on turn 2. It draws you cards every turn. The thing the deck struggles with is the fact that when you take damage and it props some of those effects, you don't actually draw cards. So, and the one drop cantrip itself doesn't draw cards. So it's not a cantrip. It just gets 2 cards from your life and you put 2 back. It's a blocker. That's cool and all, but it doesn't gain advantage. So if you're setting up your life to go into your turn 2 with 3 energy, it's probably best to play the ramp.
Yeah.
The Unison off the ramp.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially because if there's no way for you to utilize that energy or pick it back up and put it back down, you're going to lose it anyway. So you might as well sink it into, like you said, the best blue Unison in the game, which I definitely agree. Baby is super strong. The +2 draw card, you're gonna hit 5 markers so fast, and then being able to play your counter plays. The Golden Avenger grade A baby counterplay is disgusting. It's a triple striker. It draws you a card when you're playing it. Obviously, Bad Ring was always good back in the day. Swift Retaliation Cooler's always been really good. Any type of counter interaction that you can have on your opponent obviously is going to put you way ahead, and being able to cheat it out definitely puts you over the top. So with that being said, the Trunks leader, not being able to take the critical damage on the front, do you think that's what separates him and makes him a good leader? Like, do you still think he would be good if he didn't have that permanent of not being able to take critical damage?
I feel like that's a very key point for the leader, like as it stands apart from the other blue leaders. It helps you make sure that you're gaining some type of advantage against aggression, because the current aggro decks that you will see will try to critical you down, and blue's main weakness is critical and hand destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So it is sort of it's anti-blue, which is nice. Blue, the Broly deck, the red Broly, is critical. All their effects they play are critical, and plus that free blocker off the life bounces back their chain, so it really slows them down.
Yeah, that red Broly deck can just go off so quickly, especially with the addition of the 1-drop tournament pack promo. I think that's what makes the deck probably, tier 1, if not tier 0. I think being able to start that secondary chain, or have that secondary piece for you to search off of Vampa, I think it makes Broly really, really good. I still think the deck is really strong without the tournament pack promo, but I think that promo is what puts it over the top. And you're talking about Broly being able to kill you turn 2, turn 3 effectively. That's pretty good for an aggro deck. Obviously Reboot Gohan does it, but that's all leader-based aggression, and Broly does it by going up the swap ladder. So that's definitely something that we haven't had in a long time since, Bardock the Progenitor and Goten were banned, that swap ladder. But having that resurgence in the red Broly deck, especially with the Servant skill built into it, they're just such beefy bodies, and they're just going to constantly swing at you. So yeah, like you said, Blue's weakness has always been like hand advantage. So like you said, virtual advantage, even if you're taking damage off of a leader swing or off of a battle card swing from your opponent, at least you're still seeing that card, and it's not being wasted and going to a drop area. So I definitely agree with Trunks not taking critical damage. I think it's very important that that's what makes him a good blue leader. But then on the backside, I also think the spot removal for 2 blue on a leader is very, very strong. There's not really a lot of leader interaction in the game right now, especially that can shut off effects. And, being able to just bounce something to the bottom of their deck for 2 and have 1 restand, I think is super strong. What are your thoughts on that?
That is really key versus the Sin's Shenron deck. A lot of times you want to be able to use that energy that you're getting off your life and actually do something with it. And sometimes you awaken once you awaken, you really need to get rid of that 9-drop before you start playing on your key pieces. And because it's just going to cold blow less whatever you play. So
Right.
It has built-in interaction with that. I think it helps whenever you see blockers that have revenge. It helps get rid of those. And the deck has a built-in way with Obuni and others and the counter, and I think that'll be a big part of the deck after we get the Trunks, the 1-drop. Like I said, playing Baby will just give it access to all the cards that Blue usually plays.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, Trunks would not play the counter or Baby Unison because it was reliant on the Supreme Time Unison.
Right.
But with that Trunks being able to set up Baby, it will be basically a turn faster than every other blue deck. Plus, it has the built-in anti-crit and anti-hand destruction.
Yeah, I definitely can see a lot of potential. And obviously Trunks is a very, very popular character, fan favorite. So he's always going to get, some type of support. Blue's always been, a really powerful color in the game. So I don't see him ever kind of maybe I shouldn't say this. For right now, the way I'm looking at it right now, I don't see him ever being bad, but obviously in the future that could change. But I think he's just a overall really solid blue leader. The untap one, draw one is the best of both worlds when it comes to awakening skills, having spot removal, being able to untap energy with blue and sensu bean and stuff like that. I think there's a lot there. I think as more cards come out and stuff like that, we'll probably be able to flesh that archetype out and really take advantage of it. So with that being said, moving on to future sets and stuff like that, obviously we know that we're getting some future Gohan support in either set 12 or set 13. I'm not exactly sure which one is coming out. But with future Gohan, you got to obviously, that goes hand in hand with future Trunks. So are you excited for more future Trunks support, future Gohan support, anything like that coming in the newer sets?
I feel like if they make any like really generic, like free to play Vegetas and Gokus that have like any plus ability, that a +1 for Trunks, it would be very nice to help the Vegito chain. I think that Vegito 8 drop that you evolve is just the best blue boss we have currently,
Yeah.
and it's exclusive to Trunks. So
Yeah.
if you're not playing Trunks, you can't play it.
Yeah, for sure. Paralyzing prowess, coming down, ripping 2 cards, and then ripping another 2 cards when it swings. So on play, it's 4 cards your opponent's losing, and it's swinging at you for triple strike, barrier. Like that card's a house, right? I mean, we always used to complain about Gogeta 7 doing what it did. Obviously, paralyzing prowess is nowhere near as good as Gogeta 7, but it's kind of like a little bit watered down version of Gogeta 7. And being able to disrupt your opponent's hand every time it turns sideways is rough. I mean, late game when you're bringing them out for 4 energy, your opponent's probably going to be at 4 life at that point anyway. So if they're at 3 and they're in lethal, that's a 35k triple striker coming at you that you either have to combo out of or you have to have the negate for him. And he's only coming down for 4 energy. So obviously you're playing, what is it, Radiance, the Vegito for free. And then you're the 4 mana for paralyzing prowess. I think is a really, really strong turn. And obviously, being in blue, being able to untap, you're never going to really be lacking for defensive energy. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, man. That card's a house. I like that card. I was playing the Trunks deck when I first started coming back into the game with set 10, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I definitely see a lot of potential for the leader. I like Trunks too. Gohan's my favorite, but Trunks is, he's up there. So I know you're a big Trunks fan. If there's anything like one piece that the deck is missing, like whether it's draw power or like some type of a negate or like a floodgate, like what do you think like the deck would really put the deck into like that tier 1 contention?
I feel like it needs something cheaper that is able to help you in the game. Overwhelm is not very good for the deck. You don't really feel the drop that quickly, so that's not really the best way to end the game. But something cheap, because currently I feel like if you're not playing as the aggressor, you're kind of in a tough spot, especially like when Red Broly is taking his life to 4, Reboot Gohan's taking his life down to 3 instantly, essentially. You can awaken really early, which will help you stabilize against those decks, but those 1-cost 15Ks are cool, like the counterattack Vegeta and stuff like that, but we need something that's a little cheaper that is harder to interact with.
Yeah, like maybe like a free blocker that has barrier. That might be asking for too much, but obviously Trunks has the free blocker Mize, that you can free play. Maybe something like that, or maybe like you know what I really like for the deck. I really like Preface of Recovery Goku. I know it's it's a 3-drop, but when he comes into play successfully, he's gonna untap 2. So virtually he's a 1-drop, and he does have barrier, so it might be a little more difficult for your opponent to interact with it. I mean, he's a 15k, so he can put pressure on. That in combination with, the Vegeta cross time negate. If you time it right, you could probably have those 2 guys on board, ready to go into your paralyzing prowess. But obviously where we're at in the game right now, there is a lot of interaction with barrier and removal and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, something that could maybe cheat something in for free or maybe the Saiyan Duo Goku and Vegeta combo could work if it's played properly, with the right amount of energy. But I definitely think there's potential. Getting to that late game, or I should say, mid game paralyzing prowess, I think is what puts him over the top because that's such a hard battle card to deal with for your opponent. 35k barrier. I believe he has deflect also, so he's going to hit the board like 90% of the time. And constantly losing two cards out of their hand when they're swinging, that's definitely a lot of pressure for them to put on. But obviously, we just have to keep our eye out on what comes out in the future and see if the archetype itself gets any more either direct support or indirect support. So moving on, more of like a personal question, if you don't mind. I know you're a family man and you have children and stuff like that. I, of course, I'm married with kids myself, so I just kind of wanted to ask you and get your perspective. How do you juggle, being able to play Dragon Ball Super and raising your raising your kids and working and stuff like that? Like, do you find it being a little more difficult? I mean, that's probably an obvious answer, but like, how do you balance that whole idea of having this as a hobby and being a family man as well?
Well, I work at home currently, which helps me at least be around them while I'm working through the week. My current job is Monday through Friday, 11 to 8, so uh, I'm at least home most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get to play test anymore. I haven't been able to play test regularly since I think around set 4.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since my life basically changed a lot. But and Claudio was my main testing partner. So when he moved away to Germany, that kind of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to play Dragon Ball every weekend at one point, or at least would try. But I got to the point where there's no big events. Their ARG's gone.
Right.
So currently, the only things that's been in the way now is COVID and trying to make sure that I'm here for the babies and the family.
Yeah, and obviously that's that takes priority, over everything. I know what it's like, man. I believe me, I've been there. It's definitely hard to find that balance, but I definitely think it's important to make time for something that you enjoy doing. Not that you don't enjoy being with your family, but I do think sometimes it is good to have that little getaway. So, I mean, you mentioned not being able to test too much. What about like Untap and Octagon? Do you just not like doing that online? You prefer in real life testing?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between me having cards in my hand and being able to actually play with my opponent and actually understand and gauge their gestures and try to understand. Like, 'cause sometimes you can gain a little more information by just asking your opponent questions, interacting with them. Like, I got to the point where I haven't really play tested for a long time, but I do well at almost every event I play in, regardless, just because I have a good knowledge of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask any of my teammates, I'll play something I'm comfortable with and I'll do well.
Right.
And they know that I haven't play tested really. But I'm mainly when I do any type of testing or anything, I just do a lot of research via just looking at videos and or looking at other people's lists. It helps a lot. I do that when I have free time. I'll sit there and be looking at lists and trying to mess with my cards, even if it's by myself. I won't be playing against anybody, but I'll just kind of try to figure out the play through what would the deck be struggling against, how would I interact with that, what I have to do differently. But mainly, it's just sometimes playtesting doesn't do enough for you, even if it's via Untap, because you're not going to get the full effect. I haven't played on Untap one time. I used to play on Octagon a long time ago, but that was a long, long time ago. And I was kind of trying to get the understanding of the game. I think that was during set 1 and 2.
Yeah,
and a little bit of set 3.
Yeah, that's definitely a long time ago. I mean, that's like the beginning of the game. I know Octagon's been around for a long time. I mean, I used to play Octagon around set 2 as well, way before Untap even came out. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. It's very different. It's a different feel, I mean, and sometimes it's hard for people to understand like the actual feel of the game. Having your cards physically in your hand, being able to control your shuffling, like the way you shuffle. It's not an automated shuffling system on the computer. You're actually shuffling your cards, and it might be like a whole bunch of like what's it called, superstition or whatnot, but I do believe sometimes in you can will yourself to draw the card that you need, because there's been so many situations where I tell myself I need to draw this one card, I need to draw my one out, and then boom, there it is, the top of my deck. So I think everybody in our community 100% agrees that in real life play dominates online play. I don't think that's an argument that anybody's having right now. I think online play is good to use it as like a tool for learning and maybe like experiment with different ideas that you don't want to commit to financially before you at least have like some preconceived notion of how it's going to work. But I definitely agree with you. You seem like a very old school player, like an old school card game player where you want to do everything, by hand, yourself, like, testing hands and seeing what your ratios are on your draws. And, you kind of like play solitaire by yourself just to see how the deck is going to operate, researching, watching videos, stuff that we all pretty much do and we all take pride in doing, as quote unquote competitive players. But, for those people who are just getting into the game or are not as knowledge filled or comfortable with playing just yet, I think online tools are good to use, just to kind of dabble and get your feet wet so you're more comfortable. So obviously, you mentioned they're not being ARG. The big events right now are being run by PPG, and they're webcam events. So that's like the officially sanctioned events now are going to be webcam events. So what are your thoughts on the webcam play style for the current game, the way the state of the world is in right now?
I played in two of the webcam events so far. I got top 16 in the first one, but it's best of one, so it's not really like it's fun, but it's just kind of taxing. I used my phone to webcam, and my phone would die if it was more than the amount of like 5 rounds or whatever it is. So that was a struggle.
Right.
I did have fun, and the second one I played in got fifth. I was playing cooler both times, but the second time I actually had my apes on me. First time I had Frank was borrowing my apes, so that kind of hurt. But yeah, I think that the webcam events are fun. I just don't think they're made for best of three. I played in a third one, but that one, once I realized how long it was going to take, it was going to be like an 8 hour event, and I didn't have the time.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
It was best of three, and after I played the first round, that was an hour and a half. I was like, nope.
Yeah, I mean,
it was a draw, and I was about to win, but they wouldn't let us finish our last turn, so that was cool.
Yeah, it's difficult to commit that type of time. I mean, obviously, we've all been to, or at least most of us have been to, those bigger events, like those Circuit Series events that ARG used to have, or, the PPG Pro Play Tour events. And obviously those are long days, but you're prepping for that, and you're already going into that event with the mentality that you're going to be there for a very long time. The webcam event you can do in the comfort of your own home. And sometimes obviously you have kids, you have a family, things happen, like I honestly can't say that I can sit down in my basement and play Dragon Ball on webcam for 8 hours if I'm home. Like, even if I plan it ahead of time and I tell my wife, listen, I'm going to do that, I just don't think that's feasible. Something is going to happen within those 8 hours while you're at home, because there's so many things happening outside of your little bubble where your game is at. But, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that we have to social distance and all these restrictions, for that being what the norm is right now for state of play, it's something that we're going to have to roll with. Now, you mentioned best of one and best of three. Obviously, when you're playing more competitively, best of three has always been the way to go, because you don't want to lose to variance. You don't want to lose to like your 100% worst matchup without being able to side your tech options to give you a little better of a chance. But, do you think there is a really big gap between best of one and best of three? Like I look at them as completely different games. So do you agree or disagree? Like how far off are we from best of one and best of three right now?
Well, I would say when you're playing webcam, the only reason I stress best of one for being that format is just because how taxing it is playing via webcam. in the sense that you have to try your best to keep up with what your opponent's doing, and you can't grab their drop area and quickly look through. You can't ask them. You have to ask them so many questions. So I think best of one's a little better for that in that instance. But before I move forward, I just want to make sure that everybody is clear with this is listening. I'm not saying that best of one is a better format in general. I would rather play best of three all day if
Hmm.
I was actually in front of my opponent and I have my sideboard and everything, because then it's more tactical
Right.
in the sense that if I like my cooler deck is not very good as Reboot Gohan in the main deck because I didn't play that many like hard negates,
Right.
which is just an obvious thing for the format. If you're playing in this format and you have a side deck, you're gonna side more negates for Reboot.
Right.
But and that does hurt because a lot of people in best of one do want to play Reboot. So it's just you have to tweak your deck up to try to be able to handle that and still do what your deck normally does.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to, especially if you're playing a 50 card deck, right? Obviously, we have the new deck limit being up to 60, but if you're playing a 50 card deck for consistency issues or purposes, rather, it's hard to jam in, cards in there or tech options to have answers for everything. Like, you know, most of the time when I play at locals, they're best of one. So I try to make my decks for as best as I possibly can for best of one. But sometimes when you're playing in longer events, I mean, locals is usually like 3 or 4 rounds. When you're playing in a webcam event, that's like 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds. It's hard to have answers for every single meta deck, in your deck. And it's not, the game is not like how it used to be where 80% of the top cut is the same leader. Obviously there are, your strongest decks, few and far between, but I think there's a lot of variety right now with the amount of new mechanics that have been introduced and leader strategies and focus on monocolor decks or multicolor decks or whatever the case may be. There's a good amount of variations in the game right now, and there's a good diversity. It's hard for you to jam in your 50 cards to have answers for all of that. If it was like a triangle format, or if there was something that was, if there was like a boogeyman or a gatekeeper, that's obviously different. You make the decision if, well, I'm either going to beat this one deck or I'm going to lose to everything else, or vice versa. And I think right now it's healthy for the game to have diversity because people normally they want to play something that they're going to have fun with, or because it's their favorite character and they want to make it work as best as possible. And I think that's just overall good health for the game. So I know that you used to have, or you still have, your YouTube channel. So I kind of wanted to ask you, is it something that you see yourself, getting back into, making content for Dragon Ball Super? Because I believe, the more content creators we have, the more, audience we attract, and the bigger the game is going to grow.
I still make videos every now and then. I've never been a big like person for editing and whatnot. I usually just take raw footage I take from locals, or if I make a deck that I really enjoy and I just want to post it up for everybody to see, I'll do it. But I used to make a lot more videos whenever there were events that I used to travel to. Those are my favorite. I love to try to get somebody fresh after they do well at an event and get a fun video, because that's usually the best videos that they attract the most people. And people, when people are excited about things that did well, they're quick to click on it and actually want to watch and learn from the better players that actually do well in events.
Right.
But lately, it's just these webcam events. I don't take them seriously, so I don't. I mean, I'm not going to say they're not serious for some people, but I don't think of them as nothing like special. It's best of one. Everybody knows that most competitive players don't care about best of one results, but you can still take them for what they are and take the deck list you see and do the same thing like you would normally when it comes to net decking and whatnot. That does help the community. So
Yeah.
I feel like say for example, if I'm at locals and I play against somebody, I feel like I want to get their deck profile. I'll still take it and post it every now and then. Or if something new comes out, like when the Trunks deck gets the new expansion card, and the other decks get their expansion cards coming soon. I'll probably get some more videos for it and post it up. I do need to work on my new trunks list after that card comes out because I don't really test prior to cards coming out. Like right now, I could just proxy up those trunks promos,
Right.
expansion cards, and try to figure out what would be best. But I'd wait until I get those cards and other people have the new expansion cards because those will shake up some of the new decks. Plus, Draft Box 6 is just now being released, so it's going to shake up the format, and I may have to adjust the deck based off what the field looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. I mean, I've always been a stickler with proxies. I hate using proxies. It's just I have like a mental block about it. I rather try to find an alternative card that does a similar thing than go ahead and put a proxy in my deck. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my OCD that kicks in with it. But yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's obviously, we have online tools and stuff like that, but there's nothing like getting the feel of the card in your hand and making sure that it works in your list. You mentioned net decking. Now, that's been a popular topic of conversation lately in the community. Net decking, in your opinion, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
It's a necessary evil. I don't think it's really an evil. It's just people think of it as a bad thing because people that are casual or people that are old school like to say that they want to create their own ideas and make their own decks and not base it off anybody else's stuff. But in my opinion, if my teammate makes a really good deck and or I see somebody else that I know is one of my friends or anybody I just know personally from the community is doing well with said deck, I would take their strategy if I feel like I would enjoy it or I would do well with it. And I'll take it like almost card for card, and then I'll really think about it and I'll change a few, and or just take the list straight up if I feel like there's no way I can really change it, and I'll test it myself, and then eventually I will have my own version of that list, even if I changed maybe 5 cards. It's still those changes do sometimes drastically matter. Like for example, during Storm format, I feel like people didn't like that format very much, but that was a very skillful format.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
at the very end of it, the true Storm players were the ones that came up on top in the sense that they were really sound with it. And you couldn't just take that deck and play against me with it, and I'm playing Storm and expect to just do well just because you're net decking the best Storm deck, like the quote unquote best Storm list.
Hmm.
I feel like you had to really understand the format.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's a necessary evil. I mean, I think for the most part, everybody has, an idea floating around in their head that they want to put on paper, but they might not know how to go about doing that. And that's where, people posting their decks online or on YouTube or on Facebook, or that's where net decking comes from, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure we've all done it at some point where you look at a deck that you might be interested in playing. It did well at a recent event. It's a top forward or top aided or it got first place, and you're looking at the list and you're gonna say, okay, I might try this card for card, and then you said you adjust it to your playstyle. But I think it's important for people to understand that I don't think there's any type of malice behind people purposely net decking. Like some people just don't have the time to sit down and craft their own deck and brew their own deck. Like some people just don't have that. I love deck building. I don't think I'm the best deck builder, but I have fun doing it. But I can definitely see where it could be a little daunting for somebody to just look at an entire card pool and pick from thousands and thousands of cards of, okay, what 60 cards am I going to fit in this one deck? I mean, that comes from having knowledge of the card pool, playing the game for a long time, knowing the interactions, knowing the meta. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of very talented players, and there's a lot of very talented deck builders in the community. And I think for us as members, we need to take advantage of that so that we can keep up the competition, because that's what's going to help the game to continue to grow. I don't think people just purposely steal, quote unquote, steal people's lists. I mean, there might not be credit given at times, but I don't think that they're trying to do it with any like malicious intent behind it. That's just my opinion.
Like for example, I feel like a lot of people would take my cooler deck list that I posted around quite a bit. They're gonna they might not have access to all of the
Right.
cards, and they'll take those Vegeta exploit weaknesses they don't have, or those draw apes, and they'll substitute those for something else.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to call it their own deck. Most likely, most people will say, I took this guy's strategy and I tweaked it to what I had, and that's what I have." So,
Right.
and that's a good thing. You can say, "Oh, well, I don't have these, so but I know this is a good start," and that's where most neck deck type things come from. The people that are trying to get a strategy they think is fun and they want to have a start, at least something to look at to start building with.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. It's a good starting point. It's a skeleton that you want to build off of and make it your own. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants to play their own, spice. That's the word that we all use, right? But you got to start somewhere. With that being said, also, set 11, if we're talking about sets, right? There's a lot of focus on archetypes. There's a lot of focus and there's a lot of reward for leaning in heavily to that archetype. Now, I know you have a Yu-Gi-Oh background. Pretty much, I want to say 90% of our community has a Yu-Gi-Oh background. And Yu-Gi-Oh has always been that type of game where there's a lot of successful decks that are specific archetypes. Mermails off the top of my head, Six Sams, Pendulums, I guess you could consider an archetype, Cleaforts. The list goes on and on as to what decks were competitively viable and they were specific archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh. But now translating that into Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball for a very long time has always been, good stuff in this color dot deck, whether it was yellow or it was blue or it was green. But now we're seeing more of a shift into cards for specific archetypes and those cards having better payoffs while being played in those archetypes. So my question to you is, you being a man of many games and playing a lot of different card games, do you think that's good for the game of Dragon Ball to shift more towards that archetype structure as opposed to just playing good blue stuff or good yellow stuff?
So since the game has got so big with a card pool, it does help that there are new archetypes that are playable coming out as like a. You don't need to invest in set 9 or 8 or 7 or anything before to have a good deck from set 11, which is fun to say. Like, you can build a Broly deck, BR, the red one, with completely just cards from set 11, which is pretty sweet. You do need some promos, but those are obviously made for the deck from set 11 tournament pack.
Mm-hmm.
So you could start now as a new player and buy set 11 stuff and not have to worry about the past. Now, maybe your deck may be hit on the ban list eventually or touched in some way going forward, but they made these decks in set 11 and set 10 specifically with the mind of new players joining the game and or people that like archetype based decks. To it's not really hard to build one of those decks. Like if you're playing Sin Shenron or anything like that, those decks are literally so straightforward building, and there are a few things you can change, but you really need just those set 10, 11 cards. Maybe a few promos every now and then. But or old staples like Flying Nimbus
Mm-hmm.
and Senzu Bean
Mm-hmm.
for the blue decks, but
Mm-hmm.
like you don't need anything like crazy to play those decks, which is nice. I will say that I am a fan of good stuff decks because I come from a Yu-Gi-Oh background where a lot of times you just play the best cards just because they're the best cards.
Right.
But you don't need. I guess it's a good thing for both sides. Not everyone likes good stuff decks, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the whole purpose behind Bandai doing the archetype specific things is, like you said, attracting new players. You need to have a jumping on point. I mean, if you were to look at this game as a whole, let's say during Storm format, back in the day with progenitors and gotenks, just swapping up and down and doing all these shenanigans, that would have probably been a really bad time for you to be a new player in the game because, here you are, sitting across the table from somebody who's going to kill you turn 3 or turn 4 or whatever, and you just threw this deck together just to try to get into the game, and that was your first experience. It could definitely leave a bad taste in your mouth, so on and so forth. So I definitely get it from a developer's perspective where your fan base is always gonna your existing fan base is always gonna be there, right? The Trey Faircloths of the community, the Joey Paladinos, the Jordan Markles, they're always gonna be there. But what are you doing differently to get that new wave of players, into the game? The younger demographic. Obviously our game, it says 6+ on the packs and stuff when we buy them, but for the most part, you can make the argument that the majority of the player base probably ranges from age 20, 21 till maybe like 32-ish. I would say that's like our demographic, maybe 21 to 35. But what are you doing to attract those, 16 to 19-year-old kids or, the young kids? I mean, if you look at Pokemon has their own, I think even Yu-Gi-Oh has like their own circuit for kids under 12 or whatever, and then they have their regular meta. So if this game wants to stay around for a very long time and crack into the top 4 or the top 3 best TCGs around, you definitely have to cater towards different demographics. Obviously the veterans are always going to be kept happy because they're happy with new products and changes in the meta and experimenting with new keywords and mechanics and stuff like that. But if you have somebody just jump in fresh off the street, what's going to be the jumping on point for that person? Well, most of the time, they're going to gravitate towards their favorite character. So if your favorite character is Goku, you're fine because there's a million different options of Goku for you to choose. But if your favorite character is more obscure, it might be a little more difficult for you to find things like that. But it helps to have an archetype that you can build around. As you said, archetypes are very linear in their structure and they can kind of just build themselves. And being able to make a deck without investing into multiple products across the sets is definitely beneficial, in my opinion, not only for the existing player base, but for those who are looking to get into the game and start fresh. Moving product is always going to be Bandai's number one thing, but us as a player base, obviously we want the game to do well financially, but we also want to grow the competition in it as well. So moving forward, everything that's going on right now, I feel like I've had this discussion every week with everybody, the whole situation with the pandemic. And by the way, with that being said, I hope you're, being safe with you and your family. Obviously, you did mention earlier that you're working from home, which is great. You don't really have to go out too much into the world. But in your specific area, the Dragon Ball Super card game, what's the scene like? Do you have a lot of players? Like, do you have guys that, or do you have people that are gathering, consistently to keep the game alive? Like, how's it going on down there?
So I live in North Carolina. We're currently in wave 3, so we have a limitation on the amount of people that can be inside of like small buildings. But there's 2 locals. They're both on the same day, so I know I can't go to both.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have shop championship going on and stuff like that. They had one in Goldsboro, which is an hour for me last week. I didn't get to go to that one. I ended up going to the other local one. That tournament didn't fire, so it's usually early. It's earlier in the day, so.
Mm-hmm.
But we have one at the other location, a shop championship. There, actually, I think there's one at each tournaments.
So, did it not fire because of the time that it started in the day, or there's just it wasn't well known that it was going to start at that time?
Well, no, it's just I think most people are just out of town.
Yeah.
I had to travel like an hour and 15 minutes to one, an hour and 7 to the other. So it's mainly the people that used to play in my area don't really play anymore, or they moved. So I have to travel at least an hour to play.
Oof. Yeah, that could be kind of rough, man. An hour. That's an hour each way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 2 hours is a lot. I mean, my local's about 35 minutes away from me, and even sometimes that feels like too much. But for me in my area, I want to you know build it up. So sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. So I wanted to talk about your team. You're on Crossworld TCG's team, right?
Correct.
So before that all happened, I know it was like a Shenron's Lair team. So when did you guys make the transition from Shenron's Lair to Crossworld TCG?
Well, Marcus Contarsi, he owned ShenronZero.com, and that's where our team started. Mainly, that team was a team that I joined as the first person from the East Coast to join their team.
Mm-hmm.
At first, it was just all people from Cali, and eventually, Marcus ended up selling to ShenronZero.com. So we didn't want to really represent ShenronZero.com anymore because it was not something directly tied to us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a discussion a little while after, and we all came to the conclusion that supporting Joey's YouTube would be nice for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have a brand that's already established,
Right.
and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's We just decided that the remaining crew that did not go to 3 times G, which we were at one point, we combined,
Right.
and then yeah, that we just all agreed that it'd be great to migrate. But still the same people.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing changed. It's just we just changed the brand.
So how important do you think teams or play groups are in a card game community?
It's nice to have somebody there to help support you, and a lot of times we haven't had any big events for a little while, but it's awesome to just all of us all end up in the same place at every event that we can, and especially nationals, those are the best, and sometimes the conventions, like when they talk about the what's it called, Gen Con, like
Mm-hmm.
those events are pretty cool to have everybody meet up and hang out and have a good weekend. It's actually a little longer than a weekend. It's about Thursday through Monday.
Right.
So we all became just good friends, and we trust each other, and we help each other save money by just bundling up the hotel. And it's just somebody, we always have somebody to help lend us cards. Say if Jamal needed to borrow my Victory Strike, he could borrow my Victory Strike, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I think.
it's very helpful, especially whenever it comes to insight. Like for myself, I'm very, like, you can ask all my teammates. They know, even my previous teammates that left, like Pat O'Neill and all them. They always would tell me that I could just be completely out of the loop, like in the sense that I could not play for months and then just go out there with something I believed in and that I knew how it worked and I was
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with it, like Janemba for a while there, and I would end up smashing the tournament just because I got the feedback, the information relayed to me from Marcus and Joey. They would, or anybody else on the team, that would just give me information about the format. They could just relay. They just tell me in a gist what I'm going to see, what I have to be worried about, and I'd make my deck choice from there.
I
So
mean,
that stuff kind of helps.
yeah, being able to process all that information and then translate it into results, that's very impressive. I mean, being away from any type of competitive or any type of competition, you start to lose it a little bit when it comes to your muscle memory. But I think the idea, and for the most part, yes, the game has changed, but the core, elements of the game stay the same. So if you have that general knowledge, that overall experience that you've gotten, throughout the years or whatnot, I think that you never forget that. It's like riding a bike. You never forget how to ride a bike. So it's great that you have, people that you can rely on, you can count on to keep you in the loop, touch base now and then, just kind of keep tabs on things, make sure nothing is shifting major to the point where it's unrecognizable. I think Bandai has done a really good job of not only keeping their game, the core values the same, but introducing new mechanics and new keywords, over the course of the 11 sets that we've had released. But they do it in such a concentrated space, it doesn't feel overwhelming. Because if you think about it, I think we've gotten a new keyword every set that has come out. So, being able to do that and take those risks as a card game developer, putting the pressure on the community to solve the format or solve, the meta and utilize these new keywords and game mechanics, obviously they're giving us a lot of credit as players and how quickly we're going to pick up on stuff. But I think that they've done it to a point where it kind of just feels like not something that's brand new, but something that refreshes the game a little bit and gives it that rejuvenation to keep it going. So I'm really happy for you guys at Crossbow TCG. Joey's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a while. He puts out great content, so I'm happy for you guys that you guys have that play group or those people that you can go to. And I think it's important, whether it's an official team or just a group of people that get together consistently and enjoy playing the game. I think that's good because it is harder to find that in certain areas. If you're playing the game by yourself, or if it's just one, two or three of your friends, it's definitely harder to build a community with less and less numbers. So obviously, for those of you listening who enjoy playing the game, with the way the world is right now, it's very hard to go to your brick and mortar, local gaming stores and just sit down and jam out a couple of games. But we definitely hope that you guys keep it alive enough to the point where it's still enjoyable for you to sit down across a buddy at the kitchen table and play a couple of games. Because as long as there's cards being shuffled and dealt and stuff like that, I think there's still a place for the game to thrive even after the pandemic is, over at some point, hopefully.
I feel like we'll return back to normal in January or February, so should be back to normal soon.
I mean, from your mouth to God's ears, man. I hope that's the case. I know everybody it's been a very trying time. It's been a very difficult year. We're coming up on a year. It would be April, I think, a full year, calendar year. But like I said, man, if that's the case, I hope it's true. I hope everybody still practices social distancing. I hope they're listening and they're operating in whatever restrictions are being placed, because at the end of the day, everybody's health is more important than anything. So Trey, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It really was a nice conversation. We've never really spoken before, so it was a pleasure, getting to peek behind the curtain a little bit and see like how you value the game and how you look at the game. But for those listening who want to follow your content or your YouTube channel, where can we find you if we need to find you and peek at some of your deck profiles and stuff like that?
I can always just search my name. My YouTube channel is literally my name. Then we have, if you want to, on channelsair.com, you can find me there, T Faircloth 23. You can just go there. Sometimes I post them and make them public, so I'll probably post some more, especially with that trunk stuff. If I'll probably edit it and maybe look into some more of the other expansion cards and draft boxes cards, because I'm kind of fiending to play some of that Herudegarn.
Yeah, that Herudegarn stuff looks super interesting. But yeah, man, thank you. I want to thank you again for coming on. Anytime you want to talk Dragon Ball and you got a couple minutes to spare, feel free to message me and we'll get something going, man. I'm always down to talk with other members in the community, especially ones with, track records, such as yourself. So for everybody listening, thank you so much for the support. We really do appreciate it here at No Counters, No Combos. Don't forget the Computer and Gaming Universe 1K is coming up Saturday, November 14th. Registration starts at 11 a.m. and we're going to start kicking off round 1 at 12 p.m. We're capping at 32 players for COVID reasons. If you guys haven't already, feel free to visit the website online to pre-register. You can either pay using PayPal or pay at the store. Just make sure that you mark yourself as going so you can save yourself a seat, because we are capping at 32 players. But we're going to get on out of here. Thank you guys again so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Be there or be squared.